Keanu Reeves walked down a quiet street that night, the city lights glowing softly on the wet pavement. He had no cameras around him, no fans asking for photos, no security guards by his side. It was just him, dressed in simple clothes, carrying nothing more than a small bag, for a man as famous as he was. It seemed unusual to walk alone, but Keanu liked it this way. He valued peace, he valued silence, and he enjoyed blending in with the ordinary crowd whenever he could, but sometimes being ordinary was not so simple. On that street, a call had gone out to the local police. Someone had reported a suspicious man matching a vague description, a man wandering late at night, tall, quiet, keeping to himself. The report was enough to raise concern, and within minutes a police patrol car pulled into the street. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, sweeping over Keanu as he stepped off the curb. The tires screeched slightly as the car stopped, and the door opened fast. A young police officer stepped out, his hand resting firmly on his holster. He had been taught to react quickly, to treat every possible threat as serious. His eyes scanned the figure in front of him, not realizing yet who it really was. "Hey you, stop right there," the officer shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. The sound echoed off the empty buildings. Keanu froze in place, his calm face showing no fear, but the tension in the air grew heavy. He knew what this was. He knew the officer believed he might be someone dangerous. Keanu did not move quickly, he did not argue. Instead, he stayed still, breathing evenly, his hands visible at his sides. The officer stepped closer, his nerves on edge. He had been told that a suspect could be hiding in this very area. His hand now tightened on the grip of his weapon. His heart raced, unsure whether the man before him was a threat or just unlucky. From the windows above, neighbors peeked out, curious and worried. They whispered to each other, though none could clearly see the man's face under the dim streetlight. "Who is he? What's going on? Did they catch a criminal?" they murmured. Phones started to appear, recording the scene from above, capturing the tense standoff below. Keanu slowly lifted his hands a little, not too fast, just enough to show he meant no harm. His voice, calm and gentle, cut through the silence. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not who you think I am." The officer squinted, trying to place the voice, but adrenaline made his mind clouded. The city street that had been quiet only moments before was now filled with fear. A famous actor was standing in the glare of headlights, mistaken for someone else, and a gun was only one step away from being drawn fully. Keanu's calmness contrasted sharply with the officer's tense posture. It was like watching two different worlds collide, the world of fear and suspicion and the world of peace and patience. The officer barked another command, asking Keanu to keep his hands up higher. His voice trembled slightly, betraying his own nerves. He did not know who this man was, only that the situation could go wrong in seconds. The gun was now halfway raised, the street buzzing with quiet panic from those watching. And yet Keanu did not show anger. He did not argue or shout. He did not take offense at being treated like a criminal. Instead, he met the officer's fear with quiet strength. His stillness, his steady voice, and his soft expression all seemed to say, "You don't need to be afraid of me." In that moment, the city street became a stage. Though no movie was being filmed, this was real, raw, and tense. And at the center of it was a man the world knew as a hero on screen, now showing what it meant to be calm and human off screen. The people watching did not yet realize who he was, but they felt something unusual. Something about the way this man stood, the way he spoke, carried a strange power. Minutes felt like hours. The officer's finger twitched slightly near his weapon. A wrong move could have brought disaster, and yet Keanu's quiet presence seemed to slow the moment, to stretch it into something both terrifying and fascinating. The street was silent except for the sound of the distant traffic and the officer's nervous breathing. Keanu held his ground, waiting, hoping the situation would cool before it spiraled out of control. The officer's voice grew louder as he stepped closer to Keanu. He pointed straight at him, his hand now fully gripping the gun. The moment had shifted from confusion to something more dangerous. "Get down on your knees. Put your hands behind your head," he shouted, his tone filled with urgency. Keanu didn't move too quickly. He had seen moments like this in movies. But this was no scene. This was real. His hands were already raised slightly, and now he slowly lifted them higher, not wanting to make the officer feel more afraid. He didn't try to explain who he was, not yet, because he knew that in this moment, saying too much could make things worse. A small group of people had now gathered across the street. They stood near a bus stop watching closely. Some held up their phones to record while others just stared in shock. One woman whispered to a man next to her, "Wait, is that Keanu Reeves?" The man squinted and nodded slowly. "It looks like him. But what is going on? Why's the cop yelling at him like that?" Still, the officer didn't recognize him. His focus was on controlling the situation, on staying in control. He had been trained to expect the worst, to act fast before danger acted first. Keanu slowly knelt down as asked. His knees touched the cold concrete, his hands still raised in the air. He kept his eyes steady, not looking scared, but not challenging either. "I'm doing exactly what you asked," he said gently. No sudden moves. The officer didn't relax. He circled slightly to get a better angle, still aiming the gun. The streetlight flickered above, casting strange shadows on the ground. The tension could be felt by everyone watching. Some of them began to shout, "Hey, that's Keanu Reeves, he's an actor. He didn't do anything." But the officer couldn't hear them clearly. His heart was pounding too loud, and his eyes were locked on the man in front of him. To him, this could be anyone. It could be a suspect, a criminal or someone carrying a weapon. Keanu, still kneeling, kept his voice calm. "You're doing your job, officer, I understand," he said softly. "But maybe you could just ask my name first?" That line made the officer pause for a moment. It was such a strange thing to say in that situation. Most people would argue or panic or yell, but this man, he was too calm, too still. His voice didn't carry fear, it carried kindness, and something deeper, something respectful. The officer took a small step back, keeping the gun steady. "What's your name?" he finally asked, still unsure. "Keanu," came the reply, slow and clear. "Keanu Reeves." There was a pause, a moment where the officer blinked. That name sounded familiar, very familiar, but in his adrenaline-fueled mind, he couldn't place it right away. Then someone from the crowd shouted again, "That's John Wick, that's Neo, that's him, you're pointing a gun at Keanu Reeves." More murmurs followed, more phones went up. The crowd was growing louder now, and slowly the officer began to realize something was very wrong here. He looked closer, really looked, and finally, the face in front of him clicked in his memory. The movies, the posters, the interviews, yes, it really was him. The officer's hands started to shake a little, not from fear now, but from embarrassment and regret. He slowly lowered the gun, his voice quieter. I didn't realize. I'm so sorry." Keanu remained calm, still kneeling. "It's all right," he said. "You were just being careful." The officer took a deep breath and stepped back. The crowd was still filming, still whispering, but Keanu ignored it all. He looked at the officer with eyes that held no anger, no resentment, only understanding. Another patrol car arrived just then, lights flashing, siren off but spinning. A second officer stepped out quickly, rushing to the scene, but stopped when he saw what was happening. He recognized Keanu immediately. "Oh no," he muttered, walking over fast. He pulled the young officer aside and whispered urgently, "That's Keanu Reeves, man. The actor. He's not a suspect. Someone made a mistake." The first officer looked like he wanted to disappear. His face was pale, his hands still slightly shaking. Keanu slowly stood up, dusting off his knees. He didn't gloat, didn't lecture. He just looked around at the people, at the flashing lights, at the officer who had pointed a gun at him only moments ago, and said, "Things like this happen, I'm okay." Everyone stood there, unsure what to say. And then someone in the crowd clapped, just once, then another, and another. Soon the whole street echoed with applause. Not for drama or action, but for the calm way a man handled a dangerous moment. Keanu gave a small nod and began walking away. his simple bag swinging at his side. As quietly as he had arrived, he left, leaving behind a street full of people who would never forget what they saw that night. As Keanu stood calmly on the sidewalk, more people began to gather. The situation had already drawn attention, but now the crowd was growing fast. Some were on their phones, texting friends. Others were already live streaming. The street, which was quiet just minutes ago, was now buzzing with whispers and flashes of camera lights. A teenager in a red hoodie pointed toward Keanu. "That's him. That's Keanu Reeves. I saw him in the last movie." "What's going on?" he said, his friend beside him, holding a phone. Up replied, "I don't know, but that cop just pointed a gun at him and he didn't even flinch." Across the street, a woman in her 50s stood frozen with her groceries in her arms. She stared at the scene, then slowly shook her head. He's famous, but he stood there like a regular person. No shouting, no panic. The young officer who had pulled the gun earlier still looked shaken. He was now standing near his patrol car, speaking softly to his partner. His partner kept glancing toward Keanu, clearly embarrassed that they hadn't recognized him sooner. Meanwhile, Keanu stayed right where he was. He didn't run away. He didn't hide. He simply stood calmly with his hands by his sides, watching. Everything with quiet eyes. People started calling out his name. "Keanu, are you okay? We love you, man. You handled that like a legend." Some were still confused, unsure how something like this could happen to someone so famous. Keanu lifted one hand in a polite wave, not smiling too big, just enough to show the crowd that he was fine. Then someone stepped forward, a man in a black jacket, probably in his late 30s. His phone was in his hand and he was still recording. "Sir, are you really Keanu Reeves?" he asked. Keanu looked at him and gave a small nod. "Yes," he replied. "You didn't even shout when that officer had his gun out," the man said, sounding amazed. "You just stood there, like it was no big deal." Keanu smiled gently. He was doing what he thought was right, he said. "Sometimes things happen fast, but if you stay calm, it helps everyone." Those words echoed through the crowd. People fell silent for a moment, thinking about what he said. He wasn't angry, he wasn't yelling about injustice, he was teaching with his actions, showing what it meant to respond to fear with patience. A little girl tugged her mother's coat. "Mom, is that really the man from the movie with the dog?" she asked. Her mother nodded slowly. "Yes, baby, that's him, but this is better than any movie." Just then, another car pulled up, not a police car, but a sleek black SUV. A man in a suit stepped out, Keanu's assistant, finally. Catching up, he rushed over, eyes wide with concern. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked quickly. Keanu nodded. "Everything's okay," he said softly. "Let's not make a scene." But the scene was already happening. The moment was spreading. More people had stopped on their way home. More phones were up, recording, snapping photos, sharing on social media. A woman stepped out from the crowd, her voice shaking slightly. "Thank you," she said to Keanu. He looked at her with a kind expression. "For what?" he asked. "For staying calm," she said. "For not yelling, for not making it worse. A lot of people would have panicked and someone could have been hurt." Keanu nodded slowly. "Sometimes staying quiet is more powerful than shouting," he said. The officer who had pointed the gun walked toward Keanu again. He had taken off his cap, his face red with shame. "Sir, I just want to say I'm really sorry," he said. "I didn't recognize you, I thought—" Keanu raised a hand gently to stop him. "You thought I was someone else. It happens," he said. "You didn't pull the trigger. You asked questions. You followed your training." The officer looked down. "Still, you didn't deserve that," he said. Keanu placed a hand on the officer's shoulder. "We all make mistakes," he said. "What matters is how we fix them." That moment felt heavy, but not in a sad way. It was full of understanding. The crowd was silent again, watching two men, one a Hollywood icon, the other a young officer, share a moment of forgiveness and growth. A boy near the back of the crowd whispered, "He's like a real-life hero." His father nodded. "He's even better than the characters he plays." As Keanu walked back toward the SUV, A few people clapped again, not because he was famous, but because of how he carried himself. There were no angry speeches, no lawsuits, no harsh words. Just one man who stayed calm in a moment of danger and taught everyone watching something important. When the SUV pulled away, the street felt different. It was still the same buildings, the same lights, the same city. But now, it held a story that people would tell again and again. A story about how one man's patience made a bigger impact than anger ever could. The young police officer stood near his car, his face still full of regret. Even though Keanu had already accepted his apology, the guilt wouldn't leave him. He kept replaying the moment in his head, how quickly he had judged, how fast he had pulled the gun. He hadn't meant to do anything wrong, but that didn't make it feel right. His partner came over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I pointed a gun at Keanu Reeves. The officer said in a soft voice. He could have been hurt, or worse, and I didn't even give him a chance to speak. "You followed the call," his partner replied. "That's what you were trained to do, but yeah, it went too far." The officer looked back at the sidewalk where Keanu had been standing just minutes earlier. He remembered something strange that happened during that moment, something that didn't feel like training, something personal. He remembered when Keanu had asked him, "Do you have kids?" At the time, he didn't understand the question. It had caught him off guard, made him hesitate, made him lower the gun just a little. Now, thinking back, he realized it wasn't just a question. It was a reminder, a simple line that forced him to think, to feel. Yes, he did have a daughter. She was only 5, full of laughter and wild energy. She loved dogs and cartoons, and she once tried to hug a stranger just because they dropped their ice cream. What would he do if someone treated his daughter the way he had just treated Keanu? What if someone judged her without asking, made her feel like a threat just for walking down the street? That one question had changed the way he saw the whole situation. While the officer stood there lost in thought, a few people from the crowd came over to talk to him. One woman, probably in her 60s, approached him slowly. "You didn't know who he was," she said gently. "But maybe now you'll learn to look closer before you act." The officer nodded. "I will," he said. "Believe me, I will." A teenage boy nearby had recorded the whole thing and posted it online already. The clip of Keanu asking, "Do you have kids?" was already being shared. People were commenting things like, "That line hit hard," and he diffused the situation with just words. The officer sat on the hood of the patrol car for a moment, staring at the sky. He wasn't thinking about being famous or getting in trouble. He was thinking about what kind of person he wanted to be. Then his phone buzzed. It was a message from his wife, just one line, "You okay? I saw a video." "Was that you?" He replied, "Yes, it was me, but I'm okay." Then added, "We need to talk later. I've got a lot on my mind." Back in the crowd, someone said, "I've never seen a celebrity handle something like that before. Most would be yelling or suing by now." Another added, "He didn't act like a movie star, he acted like a teacher." That moment wasn't just about a cop and a celebrity anymore. It had become something larger, something people would remember. Inside the SUV, Keanu sat quietly, looking out the window as the vehicle moved slowly through the street. His assistant looked over, unsure what to say. "Do you want to go home, sir?" he asked. Keanu didn't answer right away. His mind was still in that moment, still hearing the officer's voice, still seeing the fear in his eyes. Finally, he said, "Let's take a drive first." The assistant nodded and kept going, not asking any more questions. Keanu didn't need to go straight home. He needed a little time to think, not about anger, not about what could have gone wrong, but about what went right. That young officer didn't shoot. He asked questions. He stopped himself. That meant something. Keanu believed that the world didn't need more shouting. It needed more listening, more thinking. He knew that what had just happened would end up in the news, on social media, maybe even on talk shows. But what mattered most to him was the people who saw it with their own eyes. The kids who were watching from the sidewalk. the parents who whispered lessons to their children as they left. Maybe one of those people would remember the way he stayed calm. Maybe it would help them do the same someday. He leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes. Not to sleep, but to breathe. Even in a moment where fear took over, kindness had found its way in. That thought made him smile. Just a little. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in the back seat of the SUV as it moved through the city. Streetlights passed like soft flashes across his face. His eyes weren't focused on anything outside. He was thinking about what had just happened. He had been walking peacefully, just enjoying a quiet night, and within minutes he had a gun pointed at him, not because he had done anything wrong, but because of a misunderstanding. Still, even in that moment, when fear filled the air, he chose not to panic. The officer had been scared, clearly unsure, but Keanu had stayed calm, not just for himself but for everyone watching, and now those words he had spoken, "Do you have kids?" were spreading across phones, videos, and comments. He didn't say them to be clever. He said them to remind the officer that everyone is human, that kindness still has power, even in a moment full of fear. Back at the scene, the officer stood. With his partner still shaken, he kept hearing Keanu's voice in his head, not yelling, not angry, just calm. The question echoed again. "Do you have kids?" It had stopped him from pulling the trigger. That one line pulled him out of fear and brought him back to himself. He looked down at his hands. They were still trembling slightly. His partner noticed. "You all right?" "I aimed my gun at someone who did nothing wrong," he whispered. "And he still showed me respect. That doesn't happen every day." The crowd had mostly started to leave, but a few people still stood nearby. One woman walked over and said, "I saw the whole thing. You need to understand. Most people would have yelled, maybe even fought back, but he didn't. You're lucky. He was who he was." The officer nodded. "I know," he said softly. "I really know." Later that evening, Keanu asked the driver to stop near a small park. He wanted to walk, just for a few minutes. He stepped out into the cool night air, the city quieter now. He found a bench under a tree and sat down. A few people passed by, some looking twice, wondering if that really was Keanu Reeves. Most didn't approach, sensing he wanted peace. But one older man sitting on a nearby bench recognized him and gave a small wave. Keanu smiled and nodded back. "You all right?" the old man asked, not out of nosiness but concern. Keanu looked at him for a moment, then replied, "Yeah, I'm all right. Just had a strange day." The old man chuckled. "Strange days are all we get now. Seems like the world's forgotten how to slow down." Keanu nodded. "Yeah, that's why I try to walk when I can, just be part of the world again." The old man looked at him carefully. "Heard about what happened. Saw it online already. You handled it well, son." Keanu gave a small smile. "Thank you, I just didn't want to make it worse." The man leaned forward. "You didn't just avoid making it worse, you taught that officer something, and maybe everyone watching too." Keanu didn't say anything for a moment, but those words warmed his heart. Back at the police station, the young officer sat in the locker room staring at the floor. The video was already online and it was going viral. But what surprised him was the comments. People weren't attacking him the way he expected. Yes, some were angry, some criticized the mistake, but many others focused on what Keanu had done. Comments said things like, "That officer was lucky it was Keanu. He de-escalated better than most trained people. That's emotional intelligence in real time." The officer scrolled through them slowly, reading each one. One comment hit him deeply. Maybe next time the officer will look with his heart, not just his eyes. That line stayed with him. He closed his phone and looked at the mirror in front of him. He saw himself, not as a hero or a villain, but as someone learning. He whispered to his reflection, "I have to be better." Later that night, Keanu walked back to the SUV. The B assistant opened the door for him. "Ready to head home, sir?" he asked. Keanu nodded. "Yeah, let's go." As the car drove through the sleeping city, Keanu looked out the window, not thinking about fame or danger. He thought about how powerful words can be. A calm reply, a thoughtful question, a quiet moment. All of it could change a life. Maybe even many lives. He hadn't planned for any of it, but maybe that was the beauty of it. Sometimes the most powerful things happen when you least expect them. And sometimes, a single calm voice can silence fear. The night was calm again, but the city wasn't done talking. The video of the incident had now spread across every platform: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. In every corner of the internet, people were watching the same clip over and over: a police officer pointing his gun at a man staying calm, speaking gently, never once raising his voice. And then, the big reveal. When the world realized the man was Keanu Reeves, people didn't believe it at first. Some thought it was edited. Others thought it was a movie scene. But as more angles appeared from bystanders' phones, the truth became clear. It wasn't a script. It wasn't a role. This was real. And Keanu's calm reply was what everyone kept repeating: "I'm not who you think I am," followed by, "Do you have kids?" Those words were simple, but they hit hard. In homes across the country, people watched and talked. Families gathered around screens, shaking their heads, amazed by how peaceful and kind Keanu had remained. One father told his son, "You see this? This is how you handle fear. Not by yelling, but by understanding." A teacher shared the video with her class and asked, "What do you think would have happened if he got angry instead?" The students discussed it for half the period. Some said it could have ended badly. Others said the officer might have panicked more. They all agreed on one thing: Keanu Reeves showed what real strength looks like. Meanwhile, at the police station, the young officer who had pulled the gun was called into the captain's office. He walked in slowly, nervous, unsure of what to expect. The captain didn't shout. He didn't lecture. He simply played the video again, and then paused it on the moment Keanu raised his hands. "Tell me what you see here," the captain asked. The officer took a deep breath. "I see a man who didn't run, didn't fight. He just stood there, calm, waiting." The captain nodded. "And what do you see? In yourself?" The officer looked down. "I see someone who judged too quickly," he said. "Someone who let fear take over." The captain leaned back. "You made a mistake. But what you do after matters more than what you did before." The officer nodded. "I want to learn. I don't want this to happen again." The captain smiled a little. "Good. Then start with listening more and assuming less." Outside the station, reporters had already gathered. They wanted interviews, statements, quotes, but Keanu stayed silent. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't post anything online. He just went home like any regular person would, but his silence spoke louder than 1,000 words. A week later, the police department held a press meeting, not because Keanu asked them to, but because they knew they had to say something. The chief stood at the podium, with the young officer beside him. The chief spoke clearly. A mistake was made. A man was judged by his appearance, not his actions, and that is not what we stand for. Then the young officer stepped forward, his voice shaking slightly. "I want to apologize to Mr. Reeves," he said. "Not because he's famous, but because he's human. I saw danger where there was none, and he still showed me patience." He paused, then added, "He reminded me what it means to serve, not just protect." People clapped, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Across the world, the story inspired conversations. Police departments in other cities began reviewing their training programs. Some schools even used the video in their conflict resolution lessons. Everyone was talking about how one calm man changed the energy of a dangerous moment. But Keanu didn't speak on camera. He didn't post long messages. He simply wrote a short message on his website. "Kindness is not weakness. It's strength, in its truest form." Those words were enough. They matched exactly what he showed that night. One woman who had been in the crowd that day wrote a blog post. She said, "I've seen celebrities yell at waiters, scream in traffic, or push people away. But I saw Keanu stand still while a gun was aimed at him, and he didn't act better than anyone. He acted human." That post was shared thousands of times back at home. Keanu spent his days as he usually did, reading, practicing guitar, visiting charity centers. But something had changed. Strangers approached him not to talk about movies, but to thank him for what he did that night. Some said it made them believe in humanity again. Some said it saved their relationship with someone they had judged unfairly. One man even said, "Because of you, I didn't yell at my son last night. When he made a mistake, I talked to him instead." Keanu always responded with the same quiet smile. He never asked for credit. He never claimed to be a hero. But he had become something greater, an example, and all it took was staying calm, asking one question, and choosing peace over fear. The news had spread far and wide, but it wasn't the officer's mistake that people were focused on anymore. It was Keanu's calmness, his patience, his unexpected response in the face of fear. The moment had become a lesson, not just a headline. In neighborhoods across the country, families talked about it over dinner. Teachers discussed it in classrooms. Even police trainers began using the clip as a real-life case study. Not because Keanu was a star, but because of how he handled a dangerous moment without letting ego or anger take over. One morning, the officer who had pointed the gun stood in front of his own team during a department meeting. He had been asked to speak, not forced, but invited. He took a deep breath and faced the room. "That night changed me," he said quietly. "I was scared. I made a fast decision based on what little information I had. But the man I was pointing at, he made a bigger decision." The room was silent as he continued. He could have panicked, he could have run, he could have yelled or pushed back, but he didn't. Instead, he asked me a question, not to confuse me, but to calm me down. He paused. "Do you have kids?" That's what he asked. And suddenly everything changed. That question made me think, made me feel. It reminded me that the person in front of me wasn't just a shape or a suspect. He was a man, a human being. The officers in the room nodded slowly. Some of them had kids too. They knew that feeling. A few days later, Keanu was invited to an event. Not a movie premiere, not a red carpet, but a community peace forum in a small neighborhood center. He didn't go as a celebrity. He went as a guest, quietly, dressed like everyone else. No spotlight, no cameras. Following him inside, when he walked into the room, people stood up, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. One young boy, around 12 years old, stood at the back with his mother. He whispered, "That's him, Mom, the guy from the video." She smiled and nodded. "Yes, that's him, but watch how he listens." And Keanu did just that. He listened. He didn't try to make the night about himself. He didn't give a big speech. He sat in a circle with police officers, teachers, parents, and teenagers. One woman, a mother of 3, said, "When I saw that video, it changed how I speak to people. I realized calm doesn't mean weak. It means strong in a different way." A retired officer added, "It reminded me of something I forgot long ago, that words can save lives too." Eventually, they asked Keanu. If he wanted to say something, he stood up slowly. Not rehearsed, not dramatic, just honest. "I didn't expect anything that night," he said. "I was just walking like anyone else, but when that officer pulled the gun, I saw the fear in his eyes, and I knew if I got scared too, things could go wrong." He looked around the room. "So I stayed calm. Not because I'm brave, but because I've seen what panic does, and I asked him a question. Not to challenge him, but to remind him that we are both people, living real lives with people we love." A few in the crowd wiped their eyes, quietly moved. "I'm not perfect," Keanu continued, "and I didn't do anything amazing. I just stayed still, used my words, and tried to diffuse the fear." Someone asked, "Why didn't you speak out after? You could have made it a big issue." Keanu paused, then said, "Because sometimes silence is stronger. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reflection." That answer stayed with everyone. After the event, many came to shake his hand. Some just said thank you. Others shared personal stories about times they wished they had stayed calm too. The young boy from earlier walked up with his mom and looked up at Keanu. "I want to be like you when I grow up," he said. Keanu smiled, knelt down and replied, "Then remember this, being strong means knowing when not to fight." Outside the center, reporters waited, but Keanu slipped out the side door, not looking for cameras, not looking for praise. He walked back to his car quietly. hands in his pockets thinking about how one short moment on a quiet street had turned into something so much bigger. It wasn't about being a star. It wasn't about the mistake, it was about the choice to stay calm when everything says to explode, to listen when you want to shout. And somehow, through that choice, hearts had changed, minds had opened, and strangers had started seeing each other differently. All because one man didn't raise his voice, he raised his humanity. The days passed, but the story didn't fade. Instead of disappearing like most viral videos, this one stayed. People kept sharing it, not for entertainment, but for inspiration. What made it special wasn't just that a celebrity was involved. It was that a moment of fear turned into a moment of growth. Keanu Reeves never gave interviews about it. He never tweeted about it. He never went on talk shows to retell the story for attention. Instead, the world told the story for him. News articles called it the calm that stopped a disaster. Some headlines said, "Keanu teaches the world a lesson without saying much." But the truth was simpler. It was just one human choosing peace when things could have gone very wrong. The young officer involved stayed with the force, but everything changed for him. He signed up for extra training. He volunteered to speak at youth centers and schools, not as a hero, but as someone who had learned from a mistake. In one of his talks, a student asked him, "Were you scared?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, I was. Very scared, but I was even more surprised when the man I was afraid of helped calm me down." That honesty made a deep impact. The officer no longer carried the moment as shame. He carried it as a lesson. Meanwhile, Keanu continued with his quiet life, filming movies, supporting charities, and walking around like any regular person. But something had changed in how people looked at him. He had always been respected for his acting, but now people respected him for his character. One day, a young filmmaker posted a video essay online titled, "The Day Keanu Didn't Act." It showed clips of the incident, along with slow music and a voice explaining how rare it is to see someone respond to fear with grace. The video ended with a simple message. This wasn't a movie, but it's the kind of story we all need. It received millions of views. People from all walks of life commented. Nurses, teachers, police officers, students, even soldiers, they all said the same thing in different words. "I want to be more like that." In a small town across the ocean, a police academy in Europe added the video to their training program. The instructor told the class, "This is not about what the officer did wrong. It's about what the man in front of him did right." Even in schools, teachers began using the clip to talk about conflict, emotions, and how to respond in difficult situations. One teacher asked her class, "What if every problem was met with this kind of patience?" The answers were deep, even from children. At a bookstore signing months later, someone brought up the event to Keanu. He smiled politely, but didn't talk much, just said, "I'm glad it helped people think." That one line said it all. He didn't want praise. He wanted reflection. He understood something many people forget. Fame fades, applause stops, but kindness remains. There was one final moment that sealed the story in people's hearts, a year after the incident. The officer who had once aimed the gun asked for a private meeting with Keanu. He didn't want to clear his name. He just wanted to say thank you. Face to face, Keanu agreed, and they met in a small room, no cameras, no reporters, just two men. Sitting at a table, the officer looked nervous but determined. "Thank you," he said. "Not for forgiving me, but for showing me who I want to be." Keanu didn't say much, just nodded and replied, "We all have a choice every day. Some choose fear, others choose peace. You chose to learn, and that matters." They shook hands, and in that quiet moment, everything felt complete. Outside, life went on. People walked past, not knowing what had just happened inside that room. But something important had taken place. A full circle, a moment of true understanding. That night, as Keanu walked alone once again through a peaceful street, the stars above shining, he felt no anger, no regret, only hope. Hope that more people would start to believe in calm over chaos, kindness over pride. He smiled to himself as he disappeared into the night, Not as a superstar, not as a headline, but as a man who once stopped a storm. Not with force, but with gentle words,